Hello and welcome to The Broken Sword. Today we are comparing the books and the movies for the Battle of the Hornburg.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
Today we carry on once more with our book versus movie comparison series, with us today looking more closely at one of the major battles of the War of the Ring. If you're interested, we will most likely look at sections from other books like The Hobbit 2 in the future, but for now I will say I will be sticking with The Lord of the Rings for the next few, but let me know if you do not like that idea. But anyway, for this video we are looking at the Battle of the Hornburg, also known as the Battle of Helm's Deep. This is an event that takes place within both the Two Towers book and the Two Towers movie. So let us dive in now and take a look at how it was adapted and why some of these decisions just might have been made. And just very quickly before we get into it, at the beginning of last month I put out a stat for our channel saying that over 87% of our watch time comes from unsubscribed channels, and in the last month we have managed to get that down to just about 86%. But I know we can push on more. So please, if you have not already, hit that subscribe button and help us smash the goal of surpassing 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. It would mean so much to us after the year that we have had on YouTube, so if you do, a massive thank you to you in advance. But now, on to Helm's Deep. To start things off for today, we will take a look at the original Tolkien book version, so let us first go through how the book plays out in the case that you have not read it. With the shadow of war looming over him, King Theoden decides to take around 1,000 of his soldiers out of Edoras, in the hope to take the fight away from his people that could not defend themselves, with his plan being to reach the Fords of Isen. However, Theoden is brought a message that the fords have already been lost before he can even arrive, so his plan must change. Instead, they travel to Helm's Deep, which at this time is being commanded by an old man and leader of the Watchers of Helm's Dyke, Gamling, in the absence of the usual Lord Erkenbrand. Here the soldiers of Rohan, along with the three hunters of Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli, set up their defence. Saruman's force of fighting Uruk-hai from Isengard would arrive in the middle of the night, but it wouldn't just be Uruk-hai, there would also be orcs and men of Dunland in this force as well, and they would make short work of the initial defence, reaching the main gate with a battering ram. However, they would be forced to scatter after a force of Rohirrim led by Eomer and Aragorn attacked them from a side gate of the Hornburg, thus saving the gate from this initial onslaught. From here the Uruk-hai orcs and Dunlendings would raise up ladders in an attempt to scale the wall. Aragorn and Eomer again led this defence, constantly moving the defenders to repel the climbing orcs. This was, at least in part, a distraction though, as there were also orcs who crept through a small tunnel under the wall where a small stream ran through. This meant that while the defence stood strong atop the wall, they were ambushed from behind. But the defence reacted fast and the orcs were driven back through, and the tunnel was then blocked up and watched over by Gimli. This blockage though did not stop Saruman's forces, as instead, using a method devised by Saruman, they caused an explosion. The wall was broken, and the forces of Saruman could not be kept back anymore. The forces of good had no choice but to retreat to the glittering caves and the Hornburg. As they reached the keep, the horn of Helm's Deep rung out, and a group of soldiers led by King Theoden and Aragorn rode out to meet their enemy, being followed by any remaining warriors on foot, all attempting to drive the enemy out of the keep. They split the enemy and pushed through them, reaching Helm's Dyke, where they realised that the trees from the valley, also known as the Huorns, had blocked off the escape route of the evil forces. And then reinforcements arrived. Gandalf the White, along with Lord Erkenbrand, Marshal of the West Mark, and 1,000 men on foot charged down the enemy. The fear that Gandalf struck in the enemy was so great that their will collapsed, and they could no longer put up a fight, so some tried to run, but all they could do was run into the Huorns, who made quick work of these scarpering orcs, men and Uruk-hai. Rohan had not just survived, they had won. Now that we have summarised that, and quickly before we get onto the movie version, I'd like to ask you all to leave a comment below the end of this video of book Helm's Deep or movie Helm's Deep, for whichever version that you prefer. But moving on, for some of you to get an answer, we need to carry on with a quick summary of the Peter Jackson adaptation, as there may be one or two of you who haven't seen the movies. King Theoden, having not long before been released from Saruman's and Wormtongue's poison, decides to retreat to Helm's Deep after hearing of the threat of Saruman and his Uruk-hai army. Therefore, he completely empties Edoras, women, children and all, to go and set up the strongest defence that they could. On their journey to the fortress of Helm's Deep, the people of Rohan are attacked, which leads to Aragorn falling from a cliff, and so the others all presume he has fallen. However, he survives and later reaches Helm's Deep, but on his way he passes the army Saruman has sent to lay siege to Helm's Deep, laying witness to its almighty size. He reveals this to Theoden when he arrives, and says he must prepare for battle now as they are not far away. As they are preparing, they hear a horn, but it is not the horn of an enemy, nor of more men from Rohan, but that of an army of elves who have arrived.
That is no Orkhorn.
These are Lothlorien elves, being led by Haldir. Now, the Uruk-hai arrive and the battle begins, the elves manning the outer wall and the men of Rohan around the keep. Arrows fly from the walls as the Uruk-hai raise ladders and attempt to storm the walls, but the defence manages to, just about, keep them at bay. That is until... the wall is breached by a massive explosion caused by a device created by Saruman. Meanwhile, a battering ram also makes its way to the main gate, being guarded by a wall of shields. As they begin to attempt to breach the main gate, the army of elves, along with Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli, start to become overrun and must now retreat to the keep. However, in this retreat, Haldir is slain. Aragorn and Gimli then reach the gate, and to help the men be able to reinforce the damage done to it, they use a side door to leap out in front of the main gate to hold off the Uruk-hai. They manage to hold them off long enough for the gate to be reinforced, and are then saved from above by Legolas throwing down a rope. Their attempts only slow the Uruk-hai though, and they still cannot withstand the constant assault. The few that remain of the forces of good retreat inside, but Aragorn persuades Theoden to ride out with him in one last glorious charge, so that the women and children may have time to escape the caves where they are hiding. Gimli blows the horn of Helm Hammerhand, and they charge out on horseback. They manage to slice their way through the enemy, passing back through the main gates where they witness the arrival of Gandalf, along with Eomer and a great force of Rohirrim. They charge to their king, destroying all before them. The Uruk-hai that are not slaughtered flee into the forest where the trees begin to move, destroying all who enter. So now that we are all up to date with both versions, and remember all to leave a comment of either book Helm's Deep or movie Helm's Deep, let us break down the differences as to why these may have just been made. After all, this entire sequence of events is given a much larger amount of time within the movie than it is given pages within the book. The entire Helm's Deep chapter takes up 16 pages of the book, which in its entirety is around 334 pages. And this is when looking at the 50th anniversary edition, as it will be slightly different with different editions of the book. But with the battle itself within that chapter taking place over about 11 pages of that 16. Whereas in the movie, the battle takes roughly 22.5 minutes of runtime of a 223 minutes movie when looking at the extended edition. Meaning, in the book, the battle takes up just under 5% of the story, whereas in the movie, it basically takes up 10% of the entire thing. A big difference to the importance placed upon this one battle. The Battle of Helm's Deep, or the Hornburg, is created to be more of a climax within the movie, whereas it is more of just a plot thread within the book. But why is this? Let us start off with the build-up. As in the book, Eomer travels with the party to Helm's Deep's initial defence as he had been imprisoned by Wormtongue, not banished. This was done mostly so that the three hunters could meet Eomer in the movie, and so that they could combine the characters of Eomer and Urkabran a bit too. My assumption for this decision is most likely down to wanting to reduce the number of side characters, as there is less time to be able to introduce them all properly within a movie's runtime, especially if you want the audience to have really any kind of connection with them. I mean, why would you add random characters and side stories when they're not needed for the main plot?
I could have anything down my trousers.
Or nothing.
Anyway, also to add to this, Theoden never initially intended to even go to Helm's Deep, but instead make his way to the forts of Eisen to go to battle, but changes his mind when he hears that this has already fallen. Whereas in the movie he only ever has one plan and sticks to it, almost stubbornly. And with this decision, in the movie we see that Theoden decides to take every single person out of Edoras and take them all to Helm's Deep, whereas in the book he only takes soldiers, so that they could draw Saruman's army away from any unarmed women and children. This was most likely done for added dramatic tension later, as it gave the men more to fight for when they were basically shielding the Uruk-hai from being able to reach the women and children. But sadly, it also takes away from Theoden's wisdom a touch too, at least in my opinion. He just doesn't seem like quite the same leader in the movies as he does in the books. And as well as this, it means that they could add moments like that of Theoden getting every single able-bodied older man and child as well to take up arms, really emphasising how desperate that they were after receiving the news from Aragorn on his return. This is also added to by the ambush that the people of Rohan suffer in the movie, where Saruman's Warg scouts attack them while they are travelling, as this event does not even take place in the book. This section is most likely added for a couple of reasons. One, to add a bit more of an action sequence during the middle point in a movie, and also to create the moment of Aragorn's supposed death as he falls off the cliff, as this then gives us the moment later on of Aragorn witnessing Saruman's great army and being able to pass on the message of great terror to King Theoden, which in turn leads to the moment I mentioned previously of Theoden commanding every able-bodied man and child to fight. It is very much driven more that the future of the entirety of Rohan is being decided on this battle, whereas in the book the outcome does not feel quite as important. Yes, it is going to make a difference, and it would be a massive loss if they do lose, but not to the point that the Rohirrim could no longer exist without victory. Also, to quickly add to the end of this point, another reason for the Warg Attack may have been as a way to adapt a different Warg Attack that happened in the books, which was one that happened to the Fellowship before they reached the Mines of Moria in the Fellowship of the Ring, obviously rather than the Two Towers. It may have just been a nod to that as well. But now we reach the battle, and here a large difference appears before us, and this is one that can cause some very split opinions amongst fans. In the movie, elves are sent to reinforce the defence, whereas in the book, the men of Rohan do it all by themselves. These elves in the book are most likely a bit busy elsewhere, as their home of Lothlorien was being attacked by orcs sent from Dol Guldur, so the likelihood that they could spare anyone was just not going to be the case. Yes, it can be said the idea of the alliance of men and elves being reformed once more to fight evil is nice, but in the grander story of the War of the Ring, it does not really quite make sense. And also, does it really just take away from the strength of will of the men of Rohan a bit too? Maybe, but this topic of elves and Helm's Deep could be a video and a debate all on its own, so I will leave it at that for now. But if you would like a video based on that idea in the future, let me know that by getting this video to surpass 10,000 likes for the supposed number of Uruk-hai that lay siege to Helm's Deep in the movies. But next, as the battle progresses, the breaching of the wall is slightly different too, but also a little bit similar. The idea of orcs crawling through the tunnel where the stream ran did not make its way into the movie, but the idea of the wall being blasted apart does. In the movie, it is directly shown to be an invention of Saruman, basically inventing gunpowder and turning it into a bomb, whereas in the books, it is merely just hinted at, as though it is some sort of devilry of Orthanc. So whether it is a definite object like we see planted in the movie, or more like some sort of magical spell used from the power of Saruman, is really just left more up to the reader's imagination. This is a change that I don't see as really being a bad thing. The invention of Saruman being shown directly in the film very much fits into his character and the theme of industrialization that we get from him, especially as we never get to see what he does in the Scouring of the Shire in the movies. I believe it fits quite well. It may have also been hard to show it as more of a magical ability done from afar, when he obviously wasn't even present at the battle himself. At the end of the day, some of these things just need to be made more simple and obvious for an on-screen adaptation. Now, another thing to quickly mention is how each army is made up. In the book, it is described more of a battle between 3,000 of the Rohirrim against around 10,000 Uruk-hai, but also many orcs and Dunlendings too. So, at that point you're looking at about a 3 or 4 to 1 disadvantage. whereas in the movie it is described by Legolas as more of a 300 against 10,000. That is obviously until the elves arrive, as though they tried to make it appear as an even greater feat that they managed to win. So even with the reinforcements of say around 500 elves, that still makes it greater than a 10 to 1 disadvantage, which I would imagine is really all just done for dramatic tension, giving them greater odds to overcome and a greater feeling of victory at the end of things. And also, when talking about armies, it is probably worth mentioning a quick few changes made to specific characters. We have already mentioned the merging of Eomer and Uruk-hai characters previously, but there are a couple of others. In the movies, we see Hammer get killed during the Warg ambush as they are travelling, whereas in the book he dies while defending the gate of Helm's Deep. Also in the movie, we have Gamling shown to be a captain of Theoden's guard, whereas in the book he is more of just an old man who joins the battle and fights alongside Eomer and Gimli, only being left in charge briefly while Uruk-hai was elsewhere. Then we also can look at Haldir, as he was killed during the retreat to the keep in the movie, and obviously he's not even there in the book, so his fate is never really known. Maybe he could have died during the Orc attack on Lothlorien, or their assault on Dol Guldur later, or maybe he never died at all. We can not really be sure. And finally, albeit being a small change, in the film Aragorn suggests riding out at the end to help the women and children escape from the caves, whereas in the book it is actually Theoden who suggests to do this. Another example of what I would call a weakening of Theoden's character as a leader and a king. He is just not quite the same character in both versions. So there we have it, the differences between the Battle of Hornburg between the book and the movie. What a lot of people do not realise is calling it the Battle of Helm's Deep is solely a movie thing. It is never referred to it in this way during the book. Perhaps this is down to the chapter itself being called Helm's Deep, or just to make it easier for fans of the film not to keep switching it from the name of Helm's Deep to Hornburg and back again, who knows. But as we can see from this, a lot of changes come from the events that lead up to the battle as well as within the battle itself. Whereas in the book it was made to feel like a lot more of another skirmish of a much larger war, in the movie it was built up more of a dramatic climax to the end of a movie, as is very much needed in the second movie of a trilogy. Overall, I would have to say that I do believe the Battle of Helm's Deep is very debatably the best battle ever portrayed on screen. So to say Peter Jackson did a bad job adapting it is very harsh indeed. Yes, maybe odd points can be frustrating for book fans, if they for example wanted to see certain events or certain characters appear at the right times, but I cannot fault Peter Jackson at all for this section of the story. Helm's Deep is just an epic battle that you will rarely see the likes of again. And like I said, the whole debate about the elves being there is very much a debate for another day. That is if we can get this video to over 10,000 likes. So I hope you all enjoyed this video for today and that you are enjoying these book versus movie comparisons as a whole. But now it is time for my question for you all today, and that is, what sections would you like to see me compare most between the books and the movies? This could be anything from the hobbits travelling to Bree to the differences in a character like Faramir, to another battle like perhaps the War of the Last Alliance, or something else entirely. Please let me know what you would like to see in the comments below. And also do not forget to leave that comment of book Helm's Deep or movie Helm's Deep for whichever version you prefer, and I'd love to also hear your reason to why you picked that one, along with helping us get to 10,000 likes. Now that we've reached the end of the video, I would also like to remind you all to check out the Tabletop Alliance, the 6th Ranger and History of Dragon Ball. Links for all of those channels will be in the description below. Now to shout out our patrons. Firstly, our Divine Power tier members of Kevin, Abram, Matt and Glorfindel of Gondolin, you are all awesome. And a big thanks to our Fire Demon tier members of Nashith, Denver Steel and Gregory. And as well, I cannot forget the Wizard Staff tier members of John, Andrew and Pirate747. Every single one of you is a true legend of the Bro Hero. Finally, if you have not already as well, please all the great stuff, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. You know all the amazing things to do to help us out at this point. So thank you once more if you have managed to reach the very end of this video with me today, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.